Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why some women deliberately walk alone? No boyfriend waiting at home? No dating profile? Not even the faintest signal that they're out searching. It's not about sadness, rejection, or giving up on love. It's about something much deeper. Something that unsettles the very framework we use to define womanhood. Because when a woman chooses solitude, she's not vanishing. She's resurfacing. And that rebirth doesn't come with cheers or reassurance. It comes wrapped in silence, shaped by resilience, and anchored in a type of liberation the world still doesn't know how to digest. No, she's not lonely. She's intentional. She's not cold. She just stopped igniting herself for people who never even tried to get warm. There's a certain discomfort, almost a threat, in seeing a woman who doesn't equate her worth with being desired. She unravels the illusion of control, challenges the cultural script of emotional dependence, and reveals a hard truth. Most men freeze in front of a woman who doesn't need their rescue, and most women are still learning to stand still in the presence of their own power. Carl Jung once said that what we repress within becomes part of our shadow. These women, the ones who live alone, unapologetically, are mirrors of that shadow. They embody the courage others bury. They are the silent fulfillment of a freedom that many dream of but never dare to touch. They don't plead for affection, they embody choice. They don't seduce to gain attention. They retreat, not because they fear connection, but because they've learned the cost of giving themselves to the wrong ones. They've moved past fairy tales and empty fantasies. Their pursuit isn't for a prince, but for peace. And that unsettles people, because society is obsessed with urgency. Find someone, settle down, become complete. But these women have uncovered something far more powerful, the ability to be enough in their own presence. The woman who walks alone isn't lost. She simply exists on a different frequency, one where nothing is begged for, where validation is irrelevant, and where her presence isn't a question. It's a declaration. And maybe that's why she attracts whispers, criticism, explanations no one asked for. Because deep down, people sense something about her that rewrites the rules. They see a kind of wholeness that threatens the emotional economy we've all learned to trade in. She's not searching for any kind of love. She's holding space for the kind that doesn't make her small. And until that love finds her, she holds her ground. Calm, whole, in her fullness. You might not see it yet. You might assume she's guarded, arrogant, or just licking old wounds. But deep inside, in the quiet corners of your own mind, a question flickers, one you try to ignore. What if this path, this quiet, unapologetic path, is the only one that leads to the kind of love that doesn't start with someone else, but with you? The silence surrounding a woman like this isn't emptiness, it's sacred ground. And those who don't understand its power tend to label it coldness, distance, or pride. But what few realize is that she didn't construct this space to keep the world out. She built it so she wouldn't lose herself again. Carl Jung also taught that everything we refuse to face within eventually gets projected onto others. And perhaps that's why so many still confuse solitude with absence, when in reality, solitude can be the most fertile space for growth. While most people chase fulfillment through others, this woman turned inward. In the stillness of her own depths, she met the ghosts she had avoided for years, the heartbreaks of childhood, the silent abandonments, the love she thought she had, which was really just need wrapped in illusion. Her decision to be alone didn't come from fresh wounds, it came from healed scars. She didn't stop believing in love. She just stopped accepting versions of love that made her shrink. This woman has known emotional chaos. She's loved so hard it left her shattered. She's overgiven, overcompensated, and begged for connection from those who only offered crumbs. But eventually, the begging turned to silence, and that silence became a lesson. The transformation didn't arrive as a revelation. It was forged in disappointment, not the kind that breaks you, but the kind that slowly stops wounding and starts teaching. What you see now isn't detachment, it's clarity. And clarity, when it comes from emotional evolution, can look like a fortress to those who've only known survival. She no longer reaches for just anyone. She looks for something mutual, something balanced. She's done with promises. What she craves now is presence. Full, embodied, honest presence. And maybe that's why she appears unreachable. Because she doesn't want to be fixed. She wants to be seen. And being seen requires something most aren't prepared to offer: their own truth. That's where the fear sets in. Not because she's too complex, but because she's whole. And when a woman becomes whole, she becomes a paradox to the world, a source of admiration and fear at the same time. Admiration from those trying to become whole themselves. Fear from those who still live in emotional fragments, waiting for someone else to fill the cracks. She's not here to complete anyone. She wants to overflow with someone who's already standing in their own fullness. Until then, she walks alone. Not by misfortune, not by resignation, but by sacred choice. She's not hiding. She's protecting something precious. There's a profound difference between isolation and preservation. But a world obsessed with pairings doesn't make that distinction easily. This is a world where happily ever after is still marketed in couples, where being single is quietly treated as failure. A world that still suspects something must be wrong with a woman who refuses to settle. But as Jung once said, when conformity rules, authenticity suffers. And this woman doesn't live by the rules of convention. She lives by essence. She hears the familiar refrains: "You're too picky, lower your standards, nobody's perfect." And she answers with a knowing smile, because what they call picky is actually her baseline. The baseline it took her decades to identify and finally refuse to compromise on. She's not out here searching for perfection. She's waiting for someone emotionally mature enough to love without destroying. Someone who has already looked within themselves the way she has. And let's be honest, that's rare. The tension she stirs doesn't come from how she talks. It comes from what she symbolizes. She's walking proof that joy, purpose, and peace are possible without anyone else's permission. And that terrifies people. Men who rely on women's insecurity to feel powerful are unsettled. Women still stuck in the need for approval feel exposed. But she's not here to shame anyone. She's simply being. And sometimes just existing in your own truth is enough to make the entire system tremble. This woman doesn't move fast. She has no interest in urgency. Her rhythm isn't dictated by pressure, expectation, or someone else's timeline. She honors her own pace, and that alone enrages a world built on speed. She seeks depth in a culture addicted to distraction. She craves presence in an era of endless availability. While most people are busy curating lives that look appealing on social media, she's seeking connections that echo through the soul. When she says no, it's not a tactic, it's truth. When she leaves the table, it's not a performance, it's protection. When she stays home instead of entertaining another hollow invitation, it's not aloofness, it's alignment. That kind of clarity, earned through heartbreak, solitude, and surrender, is her revolution. Because she's not here to perform, she's here to be. And that quiet being is what threatens the entire system. The problem was never her solitude. The real discomfort she causes lies in the serenity she's found within it. Carl Jung once wrote that those who look outward dream, while those who look inward awaken. And that's the path she chose. Not because it was pretty, but because it was real. She peeled off every layer, dismantled every story, stared down her own dependencies, and rebuilt herself from the inside out. She no longer relies on outside approval. She no longer defines herself through borrowed eyes. She sees herself, and that changes everything. How many times have you wondered if solitude is failure or freedom? How many times have you felt the need to apologize for not being in a relationship, for not fitting into the mold? She's asked those questions too. There was a time she believed something was wrong with her. A time when the pressure to partner up felt heavier than her own instincts. A time when she thought being alone meant she was broken. But one day, everything clicked. She realized it's better to stand alone than to disappear inside a relationship that doesn't see you. And in that moment, she made herself a quiet promise that never again would she tolerate less than what nourishes her. Her path isn't linear. There are moments of doubt, echoes of old memories, nights where the silence feels endless, but also a growing force inside her, the strength that rises every time she chooses herself with full awareness. She now knows real love doesn't imprison, doesn't suffocate, doesn't manipulate. It liberates, it uplifts, it expands without consuming. And until that love appears, she'll keep growing on her own, not because she's bitter, but because she's loyal to her integrity. This woman is the embodiment of individuation, the psychological process Jung described as becoming whole. She has fractured. She has descended into shadow. She has wandered the caverns of her own mind and returned transformed. Now that she sees herself clearly, she refuses to fragment again. She doesn't seek someone to complete her. She seeks someone to stand beside her in mutual recognition. And that's intimidating, because it asks for more than attraction. It asks for responsibility, emotional, spiritual, psychological, and very few are prepared for that kind of love. If she walks alone today, it's not due to misfortune. It's because every step she takes echoes with lessons. Every boundary she enforces is an act of reverence for her own soul. Every space she leaves behind is a declaration. Love must never be earned through begging. She no longer tries to convince, no longer justifies, no longer proves. And from that unshakable self-respect, a quiet power radiates outward, one that changes the atmosphere around her. She is dangerous now, not because of what she says, but because of what she knows. The woman who lives alone today is not the same woman who once cried herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't loved. Something inside her cracked, and that crack didn't destroy her. It set her free. Because sometimes the soul doesn't evolve through joy. Sometimes collapse is the only doorway into truth. Jung said that the tree that reaches heaven must also extend roots deep into hell. And that is her story. Not just her own, but the story of generations of women before her. She descended into ancestral pain, into inherited beliefs, into trauma that wasn't always hers, but was carried in her blood. She broke patterns. She disrupted cycles. She said no to a lineage of emotional survival disguised as love. She stopped trying to be the healer, the fixer, the woman who shrinks to make space for others. And when she stopped accepting crumbs, the world called her difficult. But she held her ground, first shaking, then steady, eventually unshakable. Because once you've walked through the dark corners of your own psyche, the fear of loneliness loses its grip. She has learned to be fed by silence, to be warmed by her own presence. She's not unreachable. She simply no longer allows entry without integrity. There is a massive difference between having an open heart and allowing yourself to be torn apart. She still opens, but only for what's real. For people who show up raw, not rehearsed. She has learned to tell the difference between truth and performance. Her intuition now speaks louder than any sweet words. Her energy is no longer available for those who drain. She walks away without guilt, not to punish, but to preserve. Her transformation isn't superficial. It's elemental, archetypal. She has accessed something ancient, a truth that was buried deep in the collective feminine. Women were not born to serve. They were born to express, to radiate, to overflow. And in touching that ancient root, something wild stirred awake in her. A force unshaken by judgment, untamed by fear. A woman who may be walking alone, but is anything but lost. She moves in sync with her own rhythm now, aligned with something far greater than social norms. She is in conversation with her destiny, and no matter how many labels they throw at her, cold, hard, complicated, none of them stick, because she no longer exists to be understood by the world. She exists to expand. She doesn't chase attention. She emanates presence. She's no longer waiting to be chosen. She chooses. And in that role reversal, she upends centuries of conditioning. And many don't know what to do with that. But she's not concerned. She's already crossed the threshold. And on the other side, she discovered something the world never taught her. That the true love story doesn't begin with another. It begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself. There's something sacred in the way she now inhabits the world. She doesn't demand the spotlight. She doesn't need to be seen to feel real. Her power lies in the quiet confidence of someone who no longer seeks external confirmation. Her strength lives in her silence. Carl Jung said that what we integrate within becomes our destiny. And maybe that's exactly what's happening. In choosing herself again and again, she has become the author of a future few can comprehend, but many secretly long for. She no longer tries to patch holes with false promises. She no longer chases proof that she's worthy of love. She doesn't knock on locked doors anymore, because she's learned something that changed everything. Presence should never have to be begged for. It should be offered, freely, openly, and with truth. And when that truth isn't there, she doesn't rage, she doesn't scream, she simply exits, with the dignity of someone who's been through the fire and won't walk back into the same flames. What most people don't realize is that this woman still desires love. She still longs to be touched, held, chosen, but not at the cost of herself. She's spent too long trying to contort her essence into forms too small for the soul she carries. Now she offers herself only where she can remain whole. And that kind of offering demands a depth far beyond the surface-level games most are used to. It requires awareness. It requires shadow work. It requires knowing who you are before trying to love someone else. She isn't searching for fantasy. She's waiting for alignment, for a soul-to-soul bond. A connection where power is shared, not hoarded. Where both people remain free, even as they choose one another. She's not looking for a love that asks her to shrink. She's seeking a love where her light doesn't need to be dimmed, where her shadow isn't feared, but held. Where she can be all of it. Chaos and calm, thunder and stillness, depth and laughter. Because she understands now that anyone who only wants your softness has not yet learned what real love looks like. And anyone who expects sweetness without sorrow doesn't know the alchemy of true connection. She's too whole to entertain halves, too awake to settle for comfort disguised as care, too emotionally attuned to tolerate shallow attachments, and at the same time, strong enough to keep walking this path, even when it's lonely, even when it aches, even when no one understands. That is the journey of a soul that has awakened. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. It means trading instant gratification for deeper truth. And that kind of truth, it scares people. The world is uneasy around women like her. Women who don't need, who don't bow, who don't play small. Because they challenge what has always been accepted. They question the invisible rules. They tear apart old contracts that said a woman's worth depends on who claims her. But when she breaks those contracts, when she steps out of that story and writes her own, something incredible happens. She gives permission. She becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, others start to see what they've been suppressing all along. She doesn't always walk with a straight spine. Some days there are tears. Other days there's laughter. But always, always, she walks grounded, knowing that even in her solitude, she is not alone. She is with herself. And that is enough. The love that may find her later will not arrive as salvation. It will be celebration. It won't come to complete her. It will come to overflow. When a woman chooses to walk alone, the world immediately reacts, tries to pull her back, label her as bitter, afraid, unlovable. But somewhere within her, something ancient stirs. A quiet voice that says, "Keep going." It's not rebellion. It's not arrogance. It's wisdom. The kind of wisdom that only grows in silence. The very process Carl Jung called individuation. The slow, sometimes brutal path of becoming fully yourself. No masks, no roles, just essence. And when that transformation takes root, something changes forever. Nothing outside of her has more weight than the truth pulsing inside her chest. That truth doesn't shout. It lives in the small gestures, the door she closes without drama, the presence she withdraws when something no longer feels right, the peace she radiates, even when no one's watching. Because she's come to understand something that can't be taught, only lived. Being alone isn't a sentence, it's a sacred contract, a vow to never betray her own soul again. And the soul of a woman who has awakened, it doesn't chase, it doesn't shrink, it doesn't pretend. It simply is. And that is more than enough. The world will keep trying to convince her she's missing something. It will offer her noise, shiny distractions, empty princes wrapped in status and charm. But she's already seen behind the curtain. She already knows it's not about finding someone, it's about not losing yourself. And once that realization settles in, nothing is the same. Desire becomes discernment. Loneliness turns into power. Waiting is no longer weakness. It becomes devotion. And everything that once hurt now becomes a teacher. Everything that once held her back now becomes fuel. You can feel it, can't you? That stirring, that tug. Maybe it's a memory, maybe a hunger, maybe a quiet echo of the woman you used to be, or the one you're becoming. Whatever it is, it's calling you to stop hiding, to stop editing your truth to be digestible, to stop living on fragments when you were built for fullness. The woman who lives alone isn't just breaking the mold. She is the reminder that you can rebuild, slowly, deliberately, powerfully. She doesn't walk ahead of anyone. She doesn't trail behind. She walks her own path, carved out by pain, grace, and fierce self-respect. And along that path, she leaves behind small fires, not to burn, but to light the way for others. So if something inside you stirred while hearing this, maybe you're ready too. Ready for a different kind of love. One that begins not with a promise from someone else, but with a reconciliation with yourself. A love that isn't performed but lived, that doesn't require sacrifice of self, but a celebration of it. A love that holds space for silence, presence, and truth. And if that love hasn't arrived yet, maybe it's because you needed time. Time to become the woman who will never again settle for less than she deserves. And if this story touched something buried deep inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Let it move through you. Let it be seen. Let it echo. Because when something speaks directly to the soul, the least we can do is let it live there.